You should never go boating at night. The quiet sound of water sloshing against the rowboat filled my ears, and I was still close enough to the shore that I could hear crickets chirping. It was the dead of night, and I'd never felt more at peace in my life. After the week I had at work, I needed this peace and quiet. Dreadfully needed it. The lake was not that large, and it was sometimes crowded during the day, but at night there was not another soul to be found. Or so I thought. I was staring up at the clear night sky, admiring the stars, just enjoying the beauty of it all, when I heard the sound of someone whistling. I sat up in my chair and turned towards the sound. At first, I thought perhaps it was some kind of bird, but as I listened more closely, I knew that wasn't the case. The whistle was far too rhythmic and specific. It was a person. It had to be. It was also hauntingly beautiful. I flicked on the lantern. It was dangerous to have it off, I know, but I was certain no one else was going to be boating at that time of night. There wasn't another boat in sight. Then, as the whistling drew closer, a figure in the water breached the light. It was a man, and he was clinging to a piece of wood. The man, who looked to be in his 20s, was wearing a black top hat and a dark blue coat. That much I could tell. He was clinging to the wood almost casually, whistling as if he didn't have a care in the world. I stared at him in complete bemusement as he drifted by my rowboat. Then I finally came to my senses. "Excuse me, do you need help?" The man stopped whistling and looked up at me, as if noticing me for the first time. "Oh, hello there," the man said. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" "Are you okay?" I said, alarmed by the man's casualness. "Do you need help?" Now it was the stranger's turn to look confused, and then he noticed the piece of wood I was staring at. "Oh, this? Don't worry. It'll do. I'm going to paddle over to the shore." "What?" I said, even more perplexed. "No, please, take my hand. I'll take you to shore." "If you say so," the man said. If he hadn't been in water, I'm sure he would have shrugged. I extended my hand over the edge of the boat, and for a split second, I wondered if I should reel it back. I had no idea who this stranger was. Should I really be pulling him into my small rowboat this late at night? But he looked young, and if I didn't help him, I knew I would regret it the next day. Especially if something happened to him. The man reached up and clasped my hand. He was wearing black gloves, and I pulled him onto the boat. He collapsed into his seat, soaking wet. Not only was he wearing a black top hat and fine blue coat, but he had on a nice vest, dress pants, and shoes. The works. He looked completely overdressed and out of place. "Thanks for the lift," he said, grinning. "My name's Daniel." "Curtis," I said, returning a nervous smile. "Curtis," Daniel said soberly. "I'll remember that name for the rest of my life. I always remember an act of kindness." Sure. So, what happened?" I asked as I started turning the rowboat around. "What do you mean?" the man asked sincerely. "Well, why were you drifting in the middle of the lake, holding onto a piece of wood? In the middle of the night, no less." "Ah, that," Daniel said. "My ship broke." "Your ship broke?" Looking over my shoulder as I paddled, I could see we were getting closer to the shore, and I couldn't have been more thankful. I wanted nothing more than to get away from Daniel as soon as possible. There was something off about him. "That's right," Daniel said matter-of-factly. He was wringing the water out of his gloves. "I misjudged how far the fall would be, and when my ship hit the water, it broke into pieces." Daniel looked up at the night sky almost longingly. "It was really much higher than I thought." "Higher?" I said, looking up. "You mean, are you trying to say your ship fell from the sky?" "Well, sure," Daniel said. "How else does one get their ship down from Sky Kingdom?" "I didn't hear anything that sounded like a ship crashing," I said, not really sure why I was even playing along. I desperately wanted to ignore everything this man was saying. Sky Kingdom? Ships falling from the sky? It was complete lunacy. But the most frightening of all was how sincere and honest Daniel sounded as he spoke, as if he believed everything he was saying. "Well, naturally you wouldn't," Daniel said, rubbing his chin. "Sky ships are designed to be quiet vessels, even when they break. That's the architecture of celestial beings for you. They're quite crafty." "Right," I said, shaking my head at the complete ridiculousness of it all. "And why were you coming down here in the first place? Why leave this, sky kingdom?" "I'm hunting," Daniel said, and his voice was dead serious. "Hunting what?" I asked nervously. "Something that deserves to be hunted. That's really all you need to know." I said nothing, partially because I didn't know what to say. But there was something else. Throughout our conversation, Daniel had no problem divulging whatever delusions he believed. Kingdoms in the sky, falling ships. So why not tell me what he's hunting? If it was so bad that not even he wanted to tell me, then maybe I really was better off not knowing. Daniel put his black gloves back on, and after adjusting his hat, he started whistling. It was that same hauntingly beautiful song. It filled the night sky, and rather than say anything else, I simply let the song have its time. Despite my reservations about Daniel, there was something pure and good about that song. It was melancholy in a way, but it had a boatman's spirit to it. It was the kind of song my dad would whistle when he'd take me out fishing, and we'd pretend to be pirates. The boat reached the shore, and Daniel and I both got out to pull it onto the sand. "Thank you again, Curtis," he said as he patted me on the shoulder. He turned to go when I grabbed him by the arm. "Are you sure you don't need help? Need anyone for me to call?" I was hoping that maybe I could get through to this delusional young man who was clearly having some kind of episode, or perhaps was on something. Daniel simply adjusted his hat and smiled. "That won't be necessary. I'm off." And so the young man in the top hat and fine blue coat set off into the woods. I dragged my boat up to the tree line and roped it off. This was easier than taking it back to my car, and I'd gotten used to this method of leaving my boat by the lake. I started walking down the path to my car, which also cut through the woods. The night, which had been so peaceful an hour ago, seemed so tense now, oppressive even. As I walked, I had this awful feeling that something was watching me. I started walking a bit faster, and I suddenly started to feel a bit like a little kid who quickly runs up their basement stairs, afraid that as they reach the top, something terrible will pull them back down. I was getting closer to my car, and then I heard it. The sound of something crying. Not something, someone. More specifically, a child. Yes, there was no mistaking it. A child was crying nearby. I wanted to ignore it at first, I'm ashamed to say, but I couldn't. I took a deep breath. "God damn it," I said, and headed toward the direction of the crying. Eventually, I entered a small clearing in the woods. There was a small bundle in the center of the moonlit clearing, and the crying was coming directly from it. For a moment, my fear was taken over by anger. I was appalled that someone would even think of leaving an infant in the woods like this. As I approached the bundle, a familiar voice shouted out, "Curtis, don't touch it!" But they were too late. As I reached down to unwrap the bundle, something dark exploded from it. I was knocked backwards, and as I looked up, what I saw threatened to break my sanity. I saw something growing out of the bundle, and it was growing very fast. Its skin was dark and wet, and I heard what sounded like bones cracking as its arms and legs grew to lanky proportions. And in some ways, its growing looked like something out of a stop-motion film. When it had stopped growing, it was at least 8 feet tall. Its face was humanoid-esque, with eyes that resembled pools of dark blood. Its mouth, which was far too wide, was filled with razor-sharp fangs. I tried backing away, but it pressed one of its clawed feet on my leg, applying a tremendous amount of pressure. I screamed in agony. "Where are you going with my little meal?" It wasn't just the fact that it spoke that frightened me. No, what truly chilled me was how intelligent the creature sounded. "Trying to scurry away? Poor little meal. I'll make it all better." "You'll not touch him," Daniel said. I looked up to see him step into the clearing. He had been the one who shouted at me not to touch the bundle. If only I'd listened. "Sky Dweller?" the creature said, cocking its head as Daniel approached. "Have you followed me all this way? Let him go," Daniel said. "And why should I do that, Sky Dweller?" the creature hissed. "This one looks like he'll make a good meal, just as your brother did." Daniel screamed in rage and extended his arm, and something blue and hot, like searing fire, flashed from it and was sent directly at the creature. It hit the creature directly in the chest and sent it flying backwards into the woods. Daniel ran to me and helped me to my feet. I was barely able to stand, aware of how much pain my leg was in. "Are you okay, Curtis?" Daniel asked me. My leg," I said, wincing through pain. "What is that thing? What's going on here?" And before he could answer, a dark and awful-sounding laugh came from the woods. The creature re-entered the moonlit clearing, its chest clearly wounded from where Daniel had struck it. Blood that was like black tar oozed from the wounds. "You've gotten stronger, Sky Dweller," the creature said, "but not strong enough." And now it was the creature's turn to extend its arms, and something black and smoky shot out of it. Daniel pushed us both to the ground. The black smoke barely missed us and hit the tree behind us, causing it to explode. Bits of splintered wood rained down on us. "You've got to get out of here, Curtis," Daniel said, rising to his feet. "Please, go!" "Why leave?" the creature said. "You'll both make such fine meals." And both Daniel and the creature fired more shots at each other, their blasts meeting in the middle, causing huge explosions like fireworks. I rose to my feet and ran without looking back, leaving Daniel. I ran as fast as I could on my bad leg. After what felt like an eternity of running through the woods, I reached the small dirt parking lot and found my car. I could still hear the sound of explosions from behind me. I got in my car and drove out of there, never looking back. When I got home, I headed straight to my kitchen and grabbed a kitchen knife. Then I locked myself into my room, staring at the door the entire time. I didn't get any sleep that night. That was impossible. After everything I'd experienced, I wasn't sure if I'd ever get any sleep again. Calling the police was out of the question. They wouldn't believe a word of what I experienced. So I simply sat there, waiting to see if that creature or Daniel would somehow find me here. When sunlight breached my window, I felt some relief. I had made it through the night. Some part of me felt like it had been a dream, even though I clearly hadn't been asleep. I put the kitchen knife down and opened the door to my room quietly. There was nothing out there except my boring hallway, and the sun was fully out now. I breathed a sigh of relief. I walked into my kitchen, turned on the sink, and splashed water on my face. I looked out the window above my sink as I let the cool water run down my face. And then I noticed it. There was something in my backyard. I walked over to the sliding door in my kitchen and opened it. I stepped out into the backyard. Sitting on the backyard table was a hat. Not just any hat, though, a black top hat. It was flipped over. I approached it carefully. Inside the hat, there was a white piece of paper. I picked it up cautiously. Written on the paper was a message. It was written in blood. It said, "The Sky Dweller was not as strong as he thought. I'll come for you soon, my little meal." I threw the paper down in horror and let out a terrified scream. I screamed until I passed out. When I woke up, I was lying in my backyard and it was night. I stared up at the moon. I knew that the creature would eventually come for me. And I hoped that when it did, I would have the courage to stand against it like Daniel did. And if I did die, I hoped that the end wouldn't be painful. But I had my doubts about that. Such terrible doubts.